How are you today? Artjeremiah here, and I'm finally back with another dungeon building episode. Apologies ahead of time, I'm pretty sick, and I don't have the best voiceover voice right now. Regardless, I'm still here today, and we're building the dungeon Armory. This is an armory intended for some ancient archbishops, otherwise known as battle clerics. So, we're going to want some intimidating sets of armor, as well as some cool maces, hanging on some old equipment racks. To start off, I rummaged through my bits and miniatures, looking for parts that I could use in the build. I really liked this shield on this Reaper Mini. This is from one of the Bones Kickstarters, but you can find him pretty cheap on Reaper's website. If you're looking to get him, he's the Small World Almoran. There's also a regular version of this character, with a similar shield and a little bit less cartoony. Anyway, I wanted to duplicate this shield because I really wanted more than one. So, in order to do that, I'm going to be making some hot glue molds. This is relatively easy to do. Just plop down some glue on a non-stick surface and press the shield into the mold. It helps to add water to the shield so it doesn't stick to the hot glue. I also spray it again when I have the shield pressed into the glue. This will cool down the outside immediately and prevent me from accidentally touching it and leaving those pesky strings of hot glue all over. While that's drying, I start gluing together some MK4 30k Space Marine torsos. No, we're not doing a Warhammer 40k build, but I figured these will work good as my Archbishop's chest armors. Now I remove the shield from the hot glue, which removes relatively easy thanks to the water I sprayed on the shield. And now we have a nice little press mold. I'm going to make a total of 5 of these molds, so I set up another and work on something else while it's drying. I clean up the Space Marine torsos with my hobby knife, and I don't need my archbishops to have jetpacks or anything, so I also clip off the back torso where the backpacks are supposed to connect to the armor. I also had some chaos possessed heads that I figured would work well as helmets. I carve out the bottom of the heads with a pin vise and my hobby knife. That will give it more of a helmeted looking appearance. Also note that I have another shield mold starting to dry. I add arm holes to the chest pieces using the same method that I did with the helmets. This will make them look more like armor and less like a torso. And now I have 5 shield press molds. I then add some battle damage to the armor with my file, just to make it look like the armor has actually been used in battle. Now I'm going to build some equipment racks. These are just going to be simple yet effective racks that lean against the wall. First thing I do is line up some mini craft sticks about 1 inch apart. I add a dollop of glue to each and then attach a coffee stirrer across the piece. I do the same a second time about a torso's width apart. While that's drying, I pull out my press molds and start kneading some moldable 2-part epoxy. This time I'm using something called Procreate. This was my first time using it, and I found it was almost the same as using green stuff. I think it may have dried slightly faster, but the end result had the same plasticky feel. If you want to try it out and tell me what you think, I'll have an Amazon link in the description, along with some other links of useful items that you might want to purchase. It also helps support the channel a little bit, and I really do appreciate any support that you guys are willing to give me. I then add a liberal coat of petroleum jelly to the molds, and then I just press some epoxy into each mold. I really could have just done one mold, but I find it a little easier to work with several at a time. I remove the molds before they dry completely, and I leave them on my non-stick surface to cure. They're a little bit tricky to remove, but with the help of a hobby knife, it's doable. To make it a little easier, you could wait a half an hour or so, but I wouldn't recommend waiting until the epoxy is completely cured, just in case you didn't add enough mold release or petroleum jelly to the mold. By this time, my equipment racks are dry enough to handle. I clip them down to size and then start the paint job. I'm actually going to be staining these with burnt umber ink mixed with glue and water. This mixture will soak nicely into the wood and help strengthen everything a little bit more. I also add some of the Dank Effects mixture that we mixed up in a previous video to the wood to make it look a little bit aged. Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have scuffed up the wood planks with a hobby knife just to add a little bit more of an aged look to it. Next time I do this sort of thing, I'm sure I'll remember. Then, while I have that drying, I make a bunch of maces by adding beads to toothpicks. I found this to be extremely effective and easy, and I really hope I get to use this method again. By this time, the epoxy shields have dried. I use my clippers and my hobby knife to clean up the flash that's common with this type of mold. At least when I do press molds, it's a common thing. Then I scrub them with some soapy water so paint won't have a hard time adhering to the greasy surface caused by the petroleum jelly. And now we have ourselves some awesome looking little shields. Now I stick everything to my tile with some blue tack and I hand prime everything with black. This is specifically Vallejo black primer. I then paint everything with a full coat of Vallejo brass. Except for the handles of the maces, I did a mahogany brown. I followed that by a wash of umber ink diluted with some water and a few drops of flow improver. I used my round nose pliers to handle the maces. It just made it a little bit easier to paint. While that wash is drying, I glue the equipment racks to the room. I hold them in place with these dollar store clamps, which aren't the strongest clamps, so I felt safe doing so without damaging the room itself. Now I dry brush the armor of the maces with some Vallejo silver. This gives the metal a more lustrous appearance and brings out a lot of detail. And then I use a bluish green glaze that I mixed up some time ago to add some oxidation randomly to the metal. If I remember right, this glaze is a mixture of green and blue inks, glazing medium, and water. I used a blow dryer to both help things dry faster and to blow some of the glaze deeper into the cracks. After everything is dry, I can attach all the equipment to the racks. As usual, I do this using PVA glue. I thought the room was going to be kinda bland if it was just a room full of armor, so we're also going to make a miniature out of one of the sets of armor and some hot glue. I decided hot glue because I wanted a sort of transparent body that represents some sort of spirit. So I just did my best to make arms and a lower body out of hot glue. And this is what I turned up with. I added some sort of tendrils to the back of the miniature to make it look like a sort of spiritual cloak. That was probably my favorite part. I could have also sculpted something and then molded it with some clear epoxy, but that's a little bit more advanced, and I really wanted this room to have like a simple, cost-effective method of making a miniature. But if you guys ever want to see that kind of thing, comment down below, and I can show you how I'd go about making a silicone mold and casting some clear resin to make a custom miniature like that. And now for some glamour shots. Thanks so much to the patrons on my Patreon. Shout out to the most recent patron, Ferox, who joined the League of Alchemists. Welcome aboard. Also, shout out to the following people, patrons of the now and past. Thanks so much for all your support. You really do help keep this channel going. My apologies to everybody who's been waiting for a video. Not only have I been sick, but in case you don't know, I build terrain professionally. And that said, I got a lot of Christmas orders and all my December had to be focused on finishing those up. I ended up building somewhere around 200 sets of terrain between November and December, so it was kind of hard to stay caught up and find time for the dungeon build. So I really appreciate all of you for sticking around. The next room in the dungeon is the torture chamber. Let me know if you have any ideas for that room and I can try to make that happen. Thanks a lot for watching.